Picture this. Your grandparents bought their first home in their mid-twenties. They saved for maybe 2 years, put down a decent deposit, and walked into a house they could actually afford. Your parents? They managed something similar in their early 30s, maybe with a bit more struggle, but it was still achievable. Now picture yourself today. You've been saving for 5, maybe 10 years. You've got a decent job, you're responsible with money, and yet, the down payment alone would take another decade to save. And even if you had it, you'd be bidding against 15 other buyers, half of whom are investors who'll never even live there. This isn't just your story, it's the story of an entire generation. And today, we're going to break down exactly how we got here, why it's actually worse than you think, and whether there's any realistic way out of this mess. Let's start with some context. For most of human history, homes weren't investments, they were just places to live. Throughout the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and most of the 80s, housing markets operated on a simple principle. A typical home costs about 3 times what a typical household earned in a year. Think about that for a second. 3 years of total household income. With a standard mortgage and decent savings, most families could realistically own a home within 5 to 7 years of entering the workforce. This was just normal. Supply met demand, and the middle class expanded. But something broke in the 1990s, and it's only gotten worse. Today, according to the latest Demographia International Housing Affordability Report, of the 95 major cities they analyzed, places like Sydney, Toronto, London, Los Angeles, not a single one qualifies as affordable anymore. The average across these cities, homes now cost 5.5 times median household income, and in the places people actually want to live, it's far worse. Hong Kong leads the nightmare with homes costing 14.4 times median income. Sydney follows at 13.8. San Jose, the heart of Silicon Valley, comes in at 11.9 times income. Vancouver, Toronto, Los Angeles, all hovering between 9 and 13 times median earnings. The report's authors actually had to create a new category, impossibly unaffordable. That's not clickbait. That's the technical term they settled on, because the old scale just could uncapture how bad things had gotten. You might be thinking, okay, but those are global cities. What about normal places? Here's the thing, there are no normal places anymore. Even mid-sized Australian cities like Perth and Brisbane are now less affordable than New York City. In the United Kingdom, the national average is double what it was in the 90s. Even the United States, long known for its affordable housing, has seen prices climb dramatically. Pittsburgh, the most affordable major city on the entire list, sits at 3.2 times in command. That's being celebrated as a miracle. What used to be the baseline is now the absolute best-case scenario. So what does this actually mean for real people? Well, the average first-time homebuyer today is in their late 30s to early 40s, a full decade older than their parents were. That's 10 years where you can't build equity, can't renovate, can't even get a dog because the landlord says no. It's 10 years of instability and life plans put on hold. And if you think renting is a reasonable alternative, consider this. In cities like Los Angeles or London, renters spend an average of 30 to 35% of their income on rent. Here's the cruel paradox. That's often more than what a mortgage payment would be on the same property. You're paying enough to own a home, you're just paying it to someone else while trying to save an impossible down payment. This isn't just a personal tragedy, it's becoming a structural problem for our economies. When people can't afford to live near their jobs, labor markets freeze up. Cities start losing the workers they need most. Teachers, nurses, tradespeople, the people who keep cities functioning get priced out first. They face brutal commutes or leave entirely, creating labor shortages. Meanwhile, existing homeowners are getting richer without doing anything, just from price appreciation. This creates a massive wealth gap between homeowners and renters that has nothing to do with work ethic or financial smarts. It's purely a function of timing. We're creating an economy where wealth just compounds for those who already have it, while everyone else falls further behind. The ladder isn't just harder to climb, it's being pulled up behind the people who already made it. How did we get into this mess? It wasn't one single thing, but a perfect storm of decisions and trends that turned shelter into a financial asset. Let's start with the big one, the transformation of housing itself. 30 years ago, a house was primarily a place to live. Today, it's an asset class, just like stocks or bonds. This shift happened because over the past few decades, a massive amount of global capital started looking for a safe place to grow. Wealth became incredibly concentrated at the top, and all that cash needed to go somewhere. It wasn't going into groceries. It went into assets. Housing was the perfect target. It's essential, tangible, and generates rental income. Suddenly, you had institutional investors, corporations, and foreign funds buying up homes, creating artificial demand that had nothing to do with people needing a place to live. At the exact same time demand was exploding, the supply of new homes was being choked off. Now, this started with good intentions, protecting green spaces, controlling urban sprawl, preserving neighborhood character, but these ideas turned into a bureaucratic nightmare. Strict zoning laws, height restrictions, parking minimums, and endless review processes made building new housing incredibly expensive, slow, and risky. In many cities, just getting permission to build can take years. So, even as prices skyrocketed, developers couldn't build more homes to meet the demand. This created a policy-made scarcity, where prices no longer reflected the cost of materials and labor, but the artificial limit on what could be built. Then, central banks threw gasoline on the fire to stimulate the economy after the 2008 crisis. And later the pandemic, they flooded the system with cheap money. Interest rates hit historic lows. When you can borrow money at 2 or 3%, and the value of a house is climbing by 10% a year, the math is irresistible. You don't even have to live in the property to profit from it. This turned housing into a financial product. Institutional buyers with access to cheap capital could outbid regular families. Pension funds started buying up residential real estate. All this money kept pouring into the same limited supply of homes, pushing prices higher and higher, completely disconnected from what people could actually afford. This might have been manageable if our paychecks had kept up, but they didn't. For most of the 20th century, as workers got more productive, they earned more. That link broke around the 1980s. Since then, productivity gains have gone mainly to shareholders and executives, not to workers. Over the last 20 years, median wages in the U.S. have barely budged, while home prices have doubled, tripled, or even quadrupled. The gap between what we earn and what a home costs has become a giant chasm. And here's a cruel twist. The rise of two-income households didn't make things easier, it just raised the bar. 50 years ago, one income could buy a family home. When a second earner joined the workforce, markets adjusted, prices rose to absorb that extra earning power. Now, it takes two incomes just to afford the same home that one income used to buy. This created a trap where both partners have to work full-time just to stay afloat. If you're single, or if one partner needs to stay home, you're at a huge disadvantage. As prices outpaced incomes, people were forced to take on massive debt, bigger mortgages, longer terms, riskier loans. Banks kept lending because rising prices made it seem safe. But this just fueled the fire, allowing buyers to bid even higher. Then the pandemic hit and broke the system completely. Remote work spread the problem to new cities. Supply chains broke, and construction costs exploded. And when interest rates finally went up to fight inflation, it didn't crash prices. Why? Because millions of homeowners were locked into their ultra-low mortgage rates. Nobody wanted to sell and trade a 3% rate for a 7% one. So the supply of homes for sale dried up even more. Throughout all this, governments tried to help, but often in the worst possible way. They offered grants and subsidies for first-time buyers. But when you can't build more homes, giving people more money to buy them just leads to bidding wars. Every dollar of assistance gets swallowed up by higher prices. Instead of tackling the root cause, the lack of supply, they stimulated demand, making the problem worse. It's a complex crisis. But understanding these interconnected failures is the first step toward finding real solutions. Here's something that doesn't make headlines nearly enough. The housing crisis is directly causing birth rates to fall across the developed world. People aren't having kids, or are having fewer than they want, because they just can't afford the space. A one-bedroom apartment might work for a couple, but add a child and you need another bedroom? That upgrade could mean an extra $500 to $1,000 a month in rent, or another $200,000 in purchase price. When housing already eats up 40% of your income and childcare another 25%, the math just doesn't work. So people delay, hoping financial stability will arrive. For many, it never does. And what about innovation? Cities are expensive because they're where ideas collide and industries cluster. But when only the wealthy can afford to live there, you lose all that diverse talent. The grad student with a brilliant idea can't stick around. The artist gets priced out. The entrepreneur has to abandon their dream. We are literally making our economies poorer by preventing talented people from living where they can be most productive. Then there's the mental health crisis nobody wants to discuss honestly. The constant stress of housing insecurity, whether it's struggling to pay rent, being stuck in an overcrowded home, or watching your dream of ownership slip away takes a huge psychological toll. It creates a kind of low-grade hopelessness that grinds people down. At its core, this is a supply problem. The solution seems simple. Build more homes. Build so many that prices have to come down. But this runs into massive opposition from existing homeowners who vote in huge numbers and want to protect their property values. They're not wrong to worry about their wealth, but they're optimizing for themselves at the expense of everyone else. Some places are starting to get it right though. Minneapolis and Oregon eliminated single-family zoning, allowing more duplexes and triplexes. California is making it easier to build accessory dwelling units. These reforms work, but they're slow and politically difficult. Singapore offers a radical alternative. Almost 90% of its residents own their homes, but it's public housing. The government builds high-quality apartments and sells them directly to citizens at subsidized prices. It treats housing like infrastructure, not an investment commodity. Could this work elsewhere? It would require a massive cultural shift, but it's worth noting that Singapore is one of the wealthiest cities on Earth. Another approach is to make housing less attractive to investors. Places like Wales and Taiwan are imposing heavy taxes on second homes, vacant properties, and quick flips. The goal is simple: discourage people from buying property they won't live in. These policies are controversial because they interfere with market freedom, but they are based on a recognition that when housing becomes too expensive for the people who actually need it, the market has failed and needs a correction. Here's another strategy that has proven to work: allowing more density where people actually want to live. Let's look at Tokyo. It's the world's largest metropolitan area, home to about 37 million people. And yet, housing in Tokyo is surprisingly affordable compared to other major global cities. How do they do it? Simple. Tokyo allows building. If you own a piece of land, you can generally build on it. The zoning is flexible, getting approvals is fast, and there's a cultural understanding that cities are meant to evolve and change. The result is that supply actually responds to demand. When more people want to move to Tokyo, more housing gets built. This keeps prices relatively stable because scarcity isn't artificially created by policy. Now, contrast that with San Francisco. It's a city with less than 1 million people, yet its housing costs often rival or even exceed Tokyo's. The difference is, onto lack of demand that San Francisco makes it incredibly difficult to build new housing, while Tokyo makes it relatively easy. But here's the hard truth. Fixing this problem is going to take decades and will require changes most people are unready to accept. For one, existing homeowners might have to accept that their property values won't skyrocket forever. They might even stagnate or decline. That's a tough pill to swallow when your entire retirement plan is built on that value increasing. It's like trying to thread a needle in a hurricane. There are no easy answers. What we really need to understand is that the current housing crisis isn't some natural disaster or a historical accident. Every time we give tax breaks to homeowners but not to renters, that's a choice. And every time we allow unlimited investment in real estate but severely restrict the supply of new homes, that's a choice. Collectively, we are choosing to prioritize the wealth of existing homeowners over the basic housing needs of everyone else. We're choosing asset appreciation over affordability. We're choosing to treat housing as a high-stakes investment instead of a fundamental human need. And the consequences of these choices are becoming impossible to ignore. Think about what's at stake. When teachers can't afford to live near their schools, when nurses can't live near their hospitals, when the very people who make our cities function can't afford to live in them, those cities stop functioning. When an entire generation hits their 40s without building any equity, without housing security, without the foundation previous generations had to start families and take risks, the economic and social damage just keeps compounding. When wealth becomes so concentrated that your inheritance matters more than your hard work and talent, we're not living in a meritocracy anymore. We're sliding back towards something that looks a lot like an aristocracy. Fixing this crisis means we have to start making different choices. We need to build more, allow for density, and stop treating homes purely as financial assets. We must recognize that housing security is the foundation for everything else we care about: economic growth, family formation, mental health, and social mobility. Some places are starting to get it. They're reforming zoning laws, investing in public housing, and taxing speculation. But most places are still stuck in the same old patterns that created this mess in the first place. And every year we wait, another group of young people ages out of the window where homeownership would have been possible for their parents. The question isn't whether we can fix this. The solutions are out there and they work. The question is whether we have the political will to use them, even when it means telling powerful interests that the party is over. Because right now, we are actively building a future where only the already wealthy can afford a stable home, where your ability to move for a better job grinds to a halt, where starting a family becomes a luxury, where the middle class dissolves into a nation of renters, working just to enrich a smaller and smaller landlord class. The housing crisis isn't coming, it's here. And unless we make different choices, an entire generation will spend their lives locked out. The dream of owning a home isn't just dying, we're killing it. The only question left is whether we're willing to do what it takes to bring it back to life. Thanks for watching.